Okay, so this is my model, and I've switched my workspace to the UV editing preset. And you can see the UV editor on the right side and our model on the left side. And so this is the base set of UVs that you get whenever you build something. And the reason that we lay these out is so that you can actually get a clean, clear texture when you apply an image to this model. So I'm going to turn on the little checkered map here. And if you hover over it, it'll give you a few options that you can do. So it says if you click it, it'll apply a checker texture to the model. And if you apply that, you can see that it doesn't look so great. Everything is a different resolution. A lot of things are skewed and stretched, and it just doesn't look good. So to be able to see your checkered pattern in a different color, you can right-click on it, but you're going to want to turn on the little image icon that's right next to the checkered pattern. And if you right-click on it, it'll show a different color rather than black and white. So I'm going to turn on the grid pattern, the checkered pattern, and I'm going to turn on the image. And if you want to change the background color of the UV editor, you can just do like you do in the viewport and hit Alt-B a few times, and it'll cycle through different colors. And so whenever you turn that checkered pattern on, sometimes the other UDIMs will show up. And that's mainly because the borders of the UVs are extended past the first UDIM. So you can see that we've got 4 extra UDIMs that are showing a pattern that shouldn't be. And you can also see the name of the UDIM. So U is obviously the horizontal number, and V is going to be the vertical number. And so that first UDIM is going to be U1, V1, and if you move over one, it's going to be U2, V2, V1. But if you move the UVs around, you can see that all of these potential UDIMs are highlighting when you hover over them. Now you can put things in multiple UDIMs, but for most of the props that we're going to be doing, they're going to reside in just this first UDIM here. So I'm going to go ahead and start laying out the UVs. But the first thing I need to do is select it all and create a base UV set. Now this is a set of UVs, but it may not have everything we need. So what I'll generally do is select everything in face mode. And then I'll go over to the create section. And generally I'll start with a camera-based selection or a camera-based projection. And what that's going to do is just create a base set of UVs for me so that I can start cutting on them and laying them out. So I'm going to turn on the shaded mode, and you have 2 options for the shaded mode. You can right click and do different colors, or you can do this default, which is blue and red. Right now it's looking purple because blue and red make purple and they're overlapping. So if we were to lay those out, they would all look either blue or red. But this is what it looks like if you have color turned on. Each individual mesh will have its own set of 2 colors. And I'm just going to go ahead and turn that back to the regular red and blue. Okay, so looking at this model, I'm going to start cutting out some different areas of it, and I'm just going to select this bottom piece real quick to make a shell from it. Now I can do this one of 2 ways. I can select the edge and go to cut and click cut, and it'll separate the UV shell out. And then from there, I can unfold it and optimize it. And once you turn on the checkered pattern, you can see that there's really no more distortion happening. This is what it looked like before, but once you actually unfold it and optimize it, everything will lay out and should look nice and uniform. The other way to do that is to select the faces that you want to create a shell with, and go over to your UV toolkit, and you're going to want to hit another create projection. So I did camera based, and what that does is it creates a new shell out of it, and it kind of enlarges it, so we'll need to shrink that back down. But then from there we can rotate it. So it's the same thing, it's just two different methods of getting there. And the squares on the grid look great. So what I'll usually do is I'll take the shells I'm not working on, and I'll just put them out of that main UDIM just to get them out of the way. And then I can take that shell and do a straightened shell on it. All right, so I was saying earlier, usually I'll try and put the cut of a shell's seam somewhere it's not going to be seen. So let's see. If I double click that and do an isolate select on it. First thing first is I should probably cut this shell, this shell that's not really going to be seen out of the UV set here. Let me turn the shader back on. It's kind of neat. You can see what's hidden there. So I'm just going to click on a face, hold down tab, and you've got a selection there. So if I move this around, you can see it's still attached to the other UVs. So I'm going to cut that, or I can just do another camera-based projection, and it'll create another shell. So I'll just go to Unfold and Optimize. I can put it up here with the bottom. And again, they're different sizes, but we're going to fix that in the end. Okay, so that leaves these two pieces. Now, sometimes whenever you're editing the model, it'll get rid of some of the UVs. So just to be sure, I'm going to do a camera-based projection for that one. And yeah, I'm gonna let's move it and move the feather over there so we can work with this one. All right, so if I were to just select this as is and try to unfold it, it wouldn't work because remember those two shells that we had back there? They're gone now. I accidentally selected them and did a camera-based projection, and it sewed them back together. So I'm just going to select that edge and then shift select that edge, and I'm going to go to cut. I'm going to cut those two shells out, and you'll notice that it's got a new darker border around it. So if I click on one of the UVs in the shell, now you can't move it in the 3D space, but UVs are for the 2D space. Same thing here, select the UVs in that view, and you can move it out of that other view. So I select those two, do an unfold and an optimize, and you can see they're the same shape and size as they were before. Okay, so now if I actually try and unfold this, it might do something different, which, you know, this doesn't look bad, but if you turn on your checkered pattern, you can see all this warping and distortion. You don't have it on the bottom or on the inside here, but we need to fix this. So turn that back off. So what I need to do is figure out one of the sides to cut down. So usually I'll say the side that's going to be not facing the camera. In this case, I'm just going to select this back edge here. Seems like a good edge, and you can see in this viewport that it's selected over here as well. So I'm going to go to cut. It's going to make that edge bolder. And then from there, I can unfold it. And this is what's going to give me. So I'm going to rotate that around a little bit. Now if I optimize that, it'll stretch out a little more. But this is still kind of warped. It's not quite even in areas. So what I should do for this one is just cut it a little more. So I'm going to select this edge loop here. And since this is sort of where kind of a natural break happens, I'm going to use this as a place to cut the shell. And we're going to cut it. And if I select those those UVs and do unfold, same thing here, unfold. And if I optimize it, it'll straighten out quite a bit, which is nice because a very straight UV shell is great for packing. It's going to fit within this UDIM a lot better. So if I turn on the checkered pattern, it actually doesn't look as bad now. We still have some warping here, so it might be worthwhile to do another cut in it, but I may be able to get away with this. So what I can do from here is like select this shell and do straighten shell. I'm just going to kind of try and fit it a little better. Now if I do, I'm going to take these and I'm going to scale these a little bit, get them kind of square. And what I'm going to do is maybe if I select the entire thing, I do straighten UVs. It doesn't look terrible, but let's see if we can do a little better. I had, I guess, U turned off. Actually, that's not as well. So to select one point and then double click and select the other point, it'll select everything within it. So if you do straighten UVs there, let's move those up just a little bit. Well, this is called either squaring your UVs or gridifying them. And you don't want to do this with organic pieces, just hard surface stuff, you can kind of get away with it. Let's do straighten. And that way it's going to fit really nicely into that UV shell. However, it will introduce some warping into your model or into your UVs. So it's not that bad, but when you get it into substance, you'll be able to tell a little more whether or not you're going to be able to keep it that way. Since this is warping, my instinct would be to like maybe cut this one a little bit, but we'll see how it goes. And it looks like I have accidentally cut the bottom here, so I'm just going to sew that really quickly. Select the edge, and I'm going to hit sew. I'm just going to sew back together here. Now for this one, if I optimize it, it starts to close in quite a bit. So for this one, I might do something a little different. So if I do straighten UVs on that, it's not going to really do that well. So what I might do is maybe cut it up. Yeah, let's not cut it up quite that much. Let's do every 2. And we'll leave this big chunk here. So we'll do cut. All right, so I'm going to rotate that. Okay, so I'm going to just snap those And same for these. I'm just holding down X to snap to grid. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the sew tool. Now, sew tool will show you the edges that can be sewn together by showing them as red when you hover over them. So I'm just going to click those. Okay, so now if I do optimize, it's going to kind of go back to its original shape. So what I want to do is do a straighten UV on that entire shell. It looks like that one kind of messed up. We'll fix it. Okay, and then what I'm going to do from there is I'm going to pin the UVs here. So if I go to pinning and do pin, it's going to make it blue. And then if I select all these UVs, what they're going to do is, and I hit, optimize or unfold, they're going to start to look like that. Now, I'm going to unpin them. And I'll just try and move these a little closer to being along the grid. And then once I do that, I can do straighten UVs, and it'll straighten them up a little bit. And I'm just hitting G. The closer they are to being straight, the better the result's going to be. If I tried doing this one, it wouldn't finish the entire thing, so you want to make sure you get the entire edge. Now, this is going to introduce a lot of warping in this particular texture, so there's a good chance I may not keep what I'm doing. And now I'm going to do the horizontal ones. And I'm just hitting G. Let me make this window just a little bigger. Sometimes I select things and then deselect what I don't want. Do whatever works. Definitely should save soon. Now, there are other ways of going about this, but this is just sort of how I have gotten accustomed to doing it. So let's look and see what this ends up looking like with the grid. Actually, it's not terrible. There are definitely some warping problems that are happening, but not bad. Oh, and you know what? Let me turn on. So I've turned on the distortion map, and it's just going to show what's stretched versus what's squished. So anything white is great. Anything red is going to be stretched, and anything blue is going to be probably. Actually, I think that's excuse me, the reverse of what I'm saying. So what is blue is stretched, and what is red is not quite expanded enough. So for the Inkwell, this actually is this is done for the Inkwell, and now I'm going to work on the texture, or excuse me, the feather. Okay, for the feather, the easiest part, it's probably going to be the spine of it. So I'm going to do a Control 1. Make sure you're inside this window when you do that. And I'm going to turn off that distortion map for now. Alright, so the spine of the feather, if I double click it, it'll select that mesh, so I can isolate it to that view. And I want to keep this one pretty minimal in terms of shells. So I actually could delete these faces here, but yeah, I definitely could delete those faces. But I'm gonna leave them because why not? So I'm gonna cut a seam down the back side of it, so it's not gonna be super visible. And then what I'm gonna do, let me deselect that edge there and make sure that I do the same here. Oh, it looks like I've got it's modeled a little differently there. So I'll just, you know what, maybe I guess I'll leave it. Maybe I'll just keep everything in one big shell. But I'm gonna cut that one. It'll give it a little more room to work with. All right, so I'm gonna go to cut. It's gonna just see a darker line, and that's just gonna mean that there's a border there now, where there wasn't before. So if I do an unfold on it, you can see here's the top, and all the way here is the bottom. I guess I should say top and then bottom. All right, so the spine is done, and now on to the pieces. So let's select everything, and then deselect the inkwell. We don't need that in the view. Okay, so this guy here, what is the best way to do this one? So it looks like everything's metal on this in the concept. So I'm just gonna select down that edge. As you cut. And if I come over here and select the UVs and I do an unfold, this is what it's going to give me. So I probably need to cut a little more on the top of it. So let's do this. Oh, okay, so that's going to be a little better. Now, I could gridify this one, but it's just so small that I'm not even going to bother with it. And I'm going to unfold that, and we're probably going to sew this back together. So to sew some edges, you know, sometimes you select the UVs that you want to sew, or you select the edges that you want to sew. But I've been using the sewing tool lately, and the brush resize is just like the soft select brush. You hold down B and left to click and drag, and then hover over it to click and drag, and it'll sew that together, and you just have to unfold it from there. Alright, so for the feathers, they're not gonna be too bad. They'll probably open sort of like a book would. So let's select that face and isolate select. And I'm just going to use this edge here, this edge loop, as a place to cut. Now, if I cut it, it'll make two shells. So let me deselect this inner edge here. And now if I hit cut, come over here to the UV editor, do an unfold, and you see it kind of unfolds along that edge, so almost like kind of like a book opening. And we'll rotate it. Okay, one down, like 5 to go. You'll notice I unfold with UVs or faces, it doesn't matter. And I'll optimize a few times after I unfold just to get it to relax a little more. Alright, so there's one other tool I want to talk about real quick, and that's the Cut and Sew UV tool, the 3D Cut and Sew UV tool. It's kind of an interesting tool. When you click it, it'll say drag to cut, control drag to draw, to sew. But I need to actually be in edge mode for this tool to work, so let's get out of the tool and then go back into edge mode and then go back into the tool again. Okay, drag to cut, control drag to sew. So to cut, I'm just going to control, click, and drag, and you'll notice that the UV shell is creating a cut there. Now this goes a little faster if you hold down Shift. It'll kind of go up the edge loop. But you want to be careful that you don't go too far on this model because we want to keep that one sewn together. And now confine it down here, unfold it, and then optimize it a few times until it stops moving. Okay. So this is a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. Move that over. Okay, same thing. Let's just use that 3D set cut and sew tool because it's pretty simple. So make sure you're in edge mode, 3D cut and sew tool. And I'm just going to hold down Shift and go all the way around. And you can see that it cuts everything really quickly. And then I'm just going to hold down Control, click and drag to sew that back together. And unfold and optimize it a few times. We got 4 left, okay. All right, so if I hit Y, exit that tool, go back into edge mode, and then hit Y again. And I'm going to turn on steady stroke. That's going to actually help you to draw a little better with these edge loops. So if you're having a hard time cutting your edge, you may want to try turning that on. Let's just right click on it and put a check next to steady stroke. I'm gonna actually turn it back off because what I'm doing doesn't need it. Kind of messy with what I'm doing anyhow. And this is no different than using the cut and sew tools in UV Toolkit. And these are almost symmetrical except for the one group of faces. Oh, you can also isolate UVs, and I didn't mean to do that, so let me go back and click inside of this window and then Control 1. It looks like I can actually switch to edge within that tool, so that's really handy. Okay, sew that edge back together. And you know what, I'm just gonna go on to the next one instead of unfolding it. I'll come back and unfold this in just a second. I can't remember what side that is, so. Oh yeah, if you if you only have edges selected, it'll only show the edges and the faces next to it. That's isolate select. I'm gonna go ahead and save this. Oops, didn't mean to cut that whole thing. Deselect those. And I could just sew them back together in the UV toolkit, but I'm gonna save myself a little time and just not cut them in the first place. Okay, so now if I come back over here and do unfold, I could actually do unfold on all of these. And it looks like we got everything unfolded. So let me straighten that one up a little bit. So let's see, I think if you click the edge and do a straighten shell. No, not doing too well. Oh well, that's all right. Okay, so now we've got everything unwrapped, it's time to pack them all into this one UDIM here. Okay, I've got a lot of shells here that I need to pack. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to rotate these to try and be either horizontal or vertically aligned. And I do that because, and you probably heard me say it before, because pixels, they run horizontal and vertically, but as soon as you have a shell that's diagonal, sometimes you'll see some stepped pixelation happening, especially in smaller maps. But it's not really something that people worry about too much now, but I like to keep them straight up and down just because it also looks a lot nicer. Okay, so this one right here, it looks like I accidentally cut, so let me sew that back together real quick. And I'm just going to use that sew tool, hover over it, and it's sewn back together. Okay. Just going to select all these shells, and I'm going to go to Modify and Layout, and I'm going to do Layout Options. Packing Resolution, it's fine to leave that at 256. Packing iterations, it's fine to leave that at 1. You can always do another pack on it. The shell pre-rotation I usually leave off, but the shell pre-scaling I turn to preserve 3D ratios, and I think that's actually the default setting. Now, if you had ratios, like if you had scaled everything to be a certain size, maybe you scaled down the bottom of the inkwell to be really tiny, and you've already gotten everything in the correct resolution that you want it, or the correct scale that you want it, you can turn this off, but I use it to uniformly scale everything so that the textile density is uniform all over. translate shells, that's just going to say that it's going to be allowed to move the shells wherever it needs to go to pack it the best. Rotate shells, it's allowing it to rotate these shells in 90-degree increments. So it can rotate the shells, but it can only do it in 90, 180, 270, or 360 degrees. Now, if you turn that to 0, that would give it a little more freedom. However, your shells would start to be, it would rotate your shells a little more than you might want them to be. So I leave this at 90, and I'll show you what it does if you have it at 0. So if I just hit 0 and apply, it's going to pack these in, and it actually doesn't look like it rotated anything. So let me see. Let me undo this. Okay, so now you can see that it rotated the shells, and they're not necessarily all going in the same direction. So this one especially is a bad one because it's taking up a lot of space that could be used. It could just be aligned to this, this edge here, and it would take up so much less space. So let me back up, and I'm going to leave that back down there at 90 instead of 10. And I'm going to leave these as default. The texture map size, that's just going to be a number you can set it to that relates to these numbers here. So if you're going to use a 1024 map for this, 15 pixels will be what I've got right now for the padding for the tile and the shell. So the shell padding is how much space is between the shells, or each shell, so how much space is right here. And the tile padding is going to be how much space is between the shells and the tile border. The rest of it you can leave as default. If you wanted to pack it into a different UDIM, you could change those location values right there. Since we're in 1.1, that's what we're going to leave it at. Okay, so then when I hit apply, it's going to go through, it's going to pack everything at the same textile density, and you can look at it and see by turning on that grid pattern, and you can see now that everything has the grid pattern, but the squares are all the same size. Now, if you want to get a little more pixels for your texture, because you've got a big chunk left over right here and a big chunk left over right here, what I would say is you want to maybe pack this by hand. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this. Now I could rotate it, but I want to do it in 90-degree increments. So I'm going to go into the transformation section, or the transform section, and then I'm going to go to rotate, and I'm going to do 90 degrees, and I'm going to rotate it counterclockwise or clockwise. Either will work. Okay, so now if I select those shells without selecting that one, and run layout one more time, it'll pack them a little bit better. It may not be the best yet. So let's try and up the iterations on it. Give it a little more time. And it may or may not do anything differently. So it didn't. So let's see. Let's try 512 for the resolution. Okay, so that gave us a little bit better of a result. And again, that number isn't really going to affect too much, but in this case, it did give us a better result for our pack. And you may want to move these a little down. And for things like the bottom, you actually can scale these down and use more room. in other areas, but that's up to you. If you've got room to leave it at its original size, you can do that too. Move that a little bit. I would really like to have these two together, but I don't know if it's going to work. So let's try. Yeah, let's see if we can get away with moving this one here. And maybe this one here. Yeah, that actually worked. Okay, I'm going to close that. And I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And next up, we can do some, make some high poly models out of this low and use that to bake some normal maps and maybe some color maps within Substance.